Have you ever wondered why Italy, a country known for its luxury cars and the world's best pasta, struggles with economic crises? It seems incredible that one of Europe's key economies has been teetering on the edge of crisis for years. Debt, high unemployment, and an aging population, these are just the tip of the iceberg. Did you know that Italy's national debt exceeds 150% of the country's GDP? This means Italy owes more than it produces in a year. For comparison, in Germany, considered one of Europe's most stable economies, this figure is around 70%. Such a heavy debt burden forces the government to allocate enormous sums just to service the debt, diverting resources from other crucial needs like social programs and infrastructure investments. Italians have grown accustomed to budget cuts that stifle economic growth. In one small town in Calabria, for example, the mayor had to reduce funding for schools and hospitals just to meet debt obligations. And what if I told you that southern Italy is so impoverished that some towns are called Europe's ghost cities, where young people leave in search of better opportunities, abandoning empty streets behind them? In regions like Basilicata and Calabria, unemployment exceeds 30%, and many young graduates immediately look for jobs abroad, often heading to northern European countries. A striking example is the town of Gangi in Sicily, where local authorities were forced to sell houses for just €1 in an attempt to attract new residents and revive the economy. Yet despite the tempting price, most young people still opt to move elsewhere in search of stability and career prospects. These facts reveal the true scale of the crisis facing Italy. Despite being part of one of the world's most developed regions, the Italian economy presents a paradox. Luxurious villas and lively street cafes stand alongside abandoned buildings and shuttered shops. How did a country that thrived for centuries end up on the brink of collapse once again? Let's rewind a few decades. After World War II, Italy played a central role in Europe's economic recovery, receiving billions of dollars through the Marshall Plan. This era was marked by rapid growth but also by deep economic disparities that laid the groundwork for future problems. In 1980, Italy faced one of the deadliest attacks in European history, the Bologna train station bombing, which became a symbol of political instability. This event not only shocked the entire nation, but also highlighted the deep political and social fractures within Italian society. Tensions between radical political groups impacted every aspect of life, including the economy. The Italian government had to divert resources to address internal security threats, limiting its ability to make long-term economic investments. Imagine this: while other European countries were investing in infrastructure modernization and technological projects, Italy was spending a significant portion of its budget on security and political stabilization. Despite investments and external support, Italy's economy repeatedly fell into stagnation, sometimes losing up to 20% of its economic output. After the rapid growth of the 1950s and 1960s, the economy began to slow down in the 1970s, leading to its first major period of stagnation. The causes weren't just internal global challenges, such as the 1973 oil crisis, sent energy prices soaring and dealt a severe blow to the economy. As a result, Italy faced record-high inflation, reaching double-digit levels in some years. The economic downturn affected everyday life. Small businesses shut down, unemployment rose, and basic goods became unaffordable for many Italians. The economic boom of the 1950s was fueled by investments and large-scale infrastructure projects. But over time, the risk of overinvestment became evident. The Italian economy relied heavily on debt-financed development, which supported growth in the short term but failed to create a sustainable foundation. One of the clearest examples of this imbalance was the construction of massive projects that later turned out to be unnecessary or inefficient. Today, abandoned industrial zones on the outskirts of Milan and Rome serve as reminders of how much money was spent in vain. Have you ever noticed that Italy's economic history resembles a roller coaster? A period of rapid growth is almost always followed by stagnation or even decline. Take the post-war years, for example. After the devastation of World War II, Italy rose from the rubble thanks to foreign investments and Marshall Plan aid. This kick-started an economic boom, particularly in the 1950s, when the country became a leading European economy, rapidly expanding its manufacturing and exports. But after this surge came a sharp downturn. By the 1970s, Italy was grappling with high debt and inflation. Many projects had been funded by external loans, and growth had been artificially sustained. The situation worsened with global shocks like the oil crisis, which severely impacted Italy's energy-dependent economy. Unemployment soared, prices for essential goods skyrocketed, and everyday life became increasingly difficult. It seemed almost paradoxical how could a country that had built such a powerful economy in just a decade suddenly struggle to adapt to a new reality. A similar cycle repeated in the following years. In the 1980s, Italy once again experienced growth, focusing on exports and developing its industry. But debts began to accumulate again, and by the end of the decade, the economy slowed down. Each new surge of growth brought new challenges: pressure on public finances, the need for reforms, and attempts to fit into the strict framework of the European Union. And here is the question: why does Italy, which has demonstrated strength and resilience so many times, always return to a period of stagnation? The answer is simple: its successes were based on temporary solutions and debt obligations. Instead of creating a stable foundation for future growth, the country often relied on short bursts, which eventually led to new stagnation. How did it happen that a country that rose from the ruins after World War II failed to use this momentum for sustainable development? Why did measures that once seemed like salvation turn into a new burden? Today, Italy faces numerous problems: an aging population, mass emigration of young professionals, and a high level of poverty, especially in the south. Did you know that every year more than 100,000 young and talented Italians leave the country, turning Italy into a net exporter of brains? This figure becomes even more alarming when considering that among the emigrants is a significant share of graduates from prestigious universities, such as Bocconi University in Milan. As a result, the country loses millions of euros invested in the education of these young people, who then apply their knowledge abroad. Why do so many young and ambitious Italians leave their homeland, preferring to work abroad? Italian graduates studying at top universities like Bocconi University in Milan move to Germany, France, and the Netherlands. And it is not surprising. Joining the EU and the policy of free movement have opened doors to economically more developed countries, where salaries are higher and career prospects broader. Italy, having invested millions of euros in the education of its citizens, loses them when they decide to build their careers in other countries. You may ask, why doesn't Italy create conditions to retain these young professionals? The problem is not only in low salaries and economic difficulties. The average size of an Italian company is significantly smaller than in other Western European countries. Companies simply cannot offer the same level of technology and opportunities as large European corporations. As a result, Italy becomes a brain exporter, losing its potential amid the competition for talent within the EU. This outflow is especially painful for the country's economy, which is already facing a demographic crisis and an aging population. The paradox is that Italy, one of the countries that helped found the European Union, is now struggling with problems that this membership has partially exacerbated. Young people leave the country, drawn by higher salaries and better living conditions, which only deepens the economic and social challenges. The youth unemployment rate reaches a staggering 23%, leading to social unrest and growing disillusionment with the future. In some regions, such as Calabria and Sicily, this figure is even higher, approaching 40%. Italian families often face situations where multiple generations live under one roof because adult children cannot afford their own housing. A prime example is the story of the Rizzi family from southern Naples, where 3 generations live in a 2-room apartment, sharing expenses and dreaming of the opportunity to leave the country. Have you ever wondered why, despite all efforts at recovery, Italy's economy continues to struggle? In the modern world, it faces a number of new challenges that make its position particularly vulnerable. One such challenge is an aging population. More than 23% of Italians are already over 65 years old, and this percentage continues to grow. This leads to enormous pressure on the pension system and healthcare, meaning additional strain on the budget. And here arises the question: who will support the economy if the number of workers decreases while the number of retirees increases? Mass emigration of young professionals further exacerbates the situation. Young and talented graduates from Italian universities seek better opportunities abroad, where they can count on higher salaries and career prospects. These people represent the country's future, its potential, which is slipping away, leaving behind a demographic gap and a lack of innovative ideas. Another issue is the low level of digitalization and the slow adoption of technology. Many small and medium-sized companies in Italy still operate in an outdated manner, avoiding large investments in modern equipment and technologies. In a world where competition is increasingly driven by technology, Italy is falling behind. Companies that do not invest in digital technologies lose productivity and cannot compete with businesses in Germany, France, and other countries where digitalization has long been the norm. And that's not all. Global instability, new trade barriers, and the need to adapt to changes in international markets require flexibility, something Italy has yet to demonstrate sufficiently. The country's economy is still too dependent on old methods and habits, reducing its chances for rapid growth and adaptation in a new environment. This situation is further aggravated by economic problems and inequality. Northern Italy, including regions such as Lombardy and Veneto, is significantly wealthier than the south. The gap in living standards between the north and south of the country is so vast that the difference in GDP per capita exceeds 50%. For example, Milan is a financial and industrial hub where business and high technology thrive, while in the south, young people are forced to leave their hometowns in search of jobs that simply do not exist. Why are some Italian enterprises that once thrived now on the brink of survival? Globalization has opened new opportunities for businesses, but it has also introduced serious challenges. Many Italian companies, especially in the textile and manufacturing industries, have started relocating their production facilities abroad. Why? The answer is obvious. It is cheaper to produce where taxes and wages are lower. This allows businesses to reduce costs and remain competitive in the global market. But do you know what the problem is for Italy? With every factory that moves abroad, the country loses jobs and tax revenues. And this is not just a theory. Imagine this. Large companies start seeking more favorable conditions in countries with cheaper labor, such as Turkey or Eastern European nations. As a result, local workers are left unemployed, and the economy, which depends on these industries, begins to suffer. Globalization has also increased competition from manufacturers in countries with lower costs. Italian brands, renowned for their quality, are forced to compete for customers who often choose cheaper alternatives, bypassing the famous Italian craftsmanship. And you are probably wondering, how does this affect the overall situation in the country? The answer is simple: it exacerbates economic inequality, particularly between the north and the south. The southern regions, in particular, rely heavily on large-scale manufacturing and factories. Italian workers lose their jobs, businesses shut down, and cities turn into economic stagnation zones. The blow from outsourcing production and competition with cheap imported goods causes entire regions to wither. How can Italy cope with these challenges when each issue is interconnected, creating a vicious cycle of problems? Can the country find a way out of this spiral of decline and stagnation? The black market, the hidden side of the Italian economy, plays a significant role in sustaining production. This phenomenon goes beyond the usual stereotypes about the mafia and has its roots in a weak tax system and regulatory framework. In the past, up to a quarter of Italy's economic output was attributed to the black market, a level unmatched by any other developed economy. Today, despite a reduction to 12%, it remains an extremely high figure for a developed country. For comparison, in Germany, this rate is less than 5%. So why does Italy continue to struggle with this issue? Lost tax revenues are so significant that the state loses around 100 billion euros annually. These sums could finance improvements in healthcare, infrastructure development, and educational programs, but instead, they vanish into the gray economy, beyond the reach of tax authorities. Take, for example, small family-run restaurants and workshops in southern cities, which often avoid official transactions to evade taxes. For Giovanni, the owner of a pizzeria in Palermo, this practice is the only way to keep his business afloat. Otherwise, he simply wouldn't be able to withstand the increasing tax burden. One of the reasons the informal economy remains so significant is the lack of alternative options for people. Small and medium-sized businesses, which form the backbone of the Italian economy, struggle to compete with large corporations and navigate bureaucratic obstacles. Companies are forced to find ways to cut costs and often resort to illegal methods. For instance, about 3 million Italians are employed in the informal sector, creating a massive number of invisible jobs that, while beneficial to individuals, ultimately harm the economy as a whole. Have you ever wondered why the Italian economy, despite its reputation for family-run workshops and small businesses, still struggles to grow? Small businesses in Italy are not just an economic category but a true cultural hallmark. You can see this in small bakeries, family restaurants, and artisan workshops producing shoes or furniture. However, despite their contribution to diversity and product uniqueness, this sector faces several challenges that limit its development. One of the main difficulties for small businesses is their size. The average Italian company is much smaller than enterprises in other European countries, which reduces its ability to compete in the global market. Large corporations can afford to invest in technology, improve production processes, and scale their products. Small businesses, on the other hand, are often forced to stick to traditional working methods due to a lack of funds and opportunities for expansion. You may ask, why don't these businesses unite to increase their competitiveness? The answer is simple. Bureaucratic barriers and tax complexities make any form of cooperation difficult. Small businesses not only face regulatory and tax challenges but also often operate semi-legally to avoid excessive costs. As a result, they lose access to government support programs and credit resources, undermining their ability to develop and innovate. It's important to remember that small companies uphold Italy's reputation as a country where quality is paramount. But in today's world, that is no longer enough. Without access to modern technologies and state support, small businesses find themselves in a difficult situation where they must fight for survival rather than strive for growth. How is it possible that a country with such potential remains overshadowed by its own successes? And why, despite all efforts, does economic inequality continue to grow? Despite its challenges, Italy remains one of the largest economies in Europe and the world. History has shown that the country has faced crises before and emerged from them with renewed growth. But can we once again witness an industrial boom like the one that tripled Italy's economic output in just 7 years, from 1985 to 1992? This achievement was driven by exports of high-quality goods such as automobiles, clothing, and furniture. Back then, made in Italy signified the highest standard of reputation that still holds weight today. However, debts began to accumulate again as both the government and citizens borrowed irresponsibly, counting on continuous growth. By 2023, Italy's national debt had reached 2.7 trillion euros, an enormous sum weighing down the economy like a heavy burden. The country's economy also suffers from insufficient digitalization and slow reforms. According to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development (OECD), Italy ranks among the lowest in the EU in terms of digital technology adoption among businesses. This reduces productivity and makes it difficult to compete with more technologically advanced countries like Germany and France. For instance, manufacturing companies in northern Italy are investing in automation to improve their competitiveness, but a significant portion of small businesses remain tied to traditional working methods. So, what will it take for Italy to overcome this crisis? Can the country rethink its management model and attract new investments to create jobs and drive economic growth? Share your thoughts in the comments, subscribe to the channel, and thanks for watching.